The email came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, sliding into my inbox like fate wrapped in courier font. I was nursing my third cup of coffee, scrolling through maritime job boards that had become my midnight ritual of desperation. Sarah was asleep in our cramped studio, her sailing certification still fresh on the nightstand beside her. We'd blown through our savings, chasing the dream of professional sailing, and now we were 3 weeks behind on rent. The subject line made my heart skip. Exclusive maritime opportunity, Palau to private island, $75,000. $75,000. More money than we'd seen in 2 years combined. The sender was Neptune Marine Solutions, and their logo looked expensive, all sharp angles and gradient blues. The job seemed almost too good to be true. Sail a luxury yacht from Palau to a private island near the Mariana Trench. 2 weeks maximum. All expenses paid, plus the kind of money that could change our lives. I shook Sarah awake, my hands trembling as I held up my laptop screen. "Baby, look at this." She squinted at the bright display, her hair messy from sleep. 75 grand for 2 weeks? She sat up fast, suddenly wide awake. What's the catch? No catch, just transport a yacht for some anonymous billionaire. Says here they need an experienced couple, and they found us through the Maritime Professional Registry. Sarah grabbed the laptop, scanning the details. The client wanted discretion. The destination was classified as a private research facility. And we'd be sailing solo. No crew, no additional personnel. Just us, the ocean, and what the email described as a state-of-the-art luxury vessel. "This is it," Sarah whispered, her eyes bright with possibility. "This is our break." We submitted our certifications, references, and a short video introduction before dawn. By noon, we had a response. Congratulations! Travel arrangements to Palau would be sent within 24 hours. No interview, no additional questions. Just a digital contract, thick with non-disclosure agreements and insurance waivers. The flight to Palau was first class, another sign that we'd stumbled into something extraordinary. Sarah squeezed my hand as we descended toward the turquoise waters of the Pacific, both of us giddy with the kind of hope we'd almost forgotten existed. The marina where we were supposed to meet our contact was smaller than expected, tucked into a quiet inlet away from the tourist areas. A man in an expensive suit waited by the dock, checking his watch with the impatience of someone accustomed to punctuality. He introduced himself as Marcus Webb, a representative of Neptune Marine Solutions, and his handshake was firm, but oddly cold. "You must be the Hendersons," he said, consulting a tablet that never seemed to leave his hands. "The vessel is moored at the private dock. I trust the accommodations were satisfactory?" "More than satisfactory," I said, still amazed by the whole experience. "Thank you." Webb nodded curtly and gestured for us to follow him down a wooden walkway that led away from the main marina. "A few things to discuss before we proceed. The vessel is experimental in nature. Cutting-edge technology, automation systems that are still in beta testing. The owner is something of a pioneer in marine engineering. We walked past smaller boats and fishing vessels until we reached a section of the marina I hadn't noticed from the air. It was more industrial here, with higher security fences and cameras mounted on poles. Webb swiped a keycard at a gate, and we stepped through into what felt like a different world. And there it was. The yacht wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. It was massive, easily 100 feet long, but it was the design that made my breath catch. Instead of the sleek white fiberglass of traditional luxury vessels, this boat looked like it had been carved from some dark metallic substance. The hull was a deep gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and the surface was so smooth it was almost organic. "Jesus," Sarah whispered beside me. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Webb said with the first genuine smile we'd seen from him. "The hull is made from a proprietary alloy, completely non-reflective, designed for minimal radar signature. The owner values privacy above all else." As we got closer, I could see that the yacht's superstructure was more angular than curved, like someone had taken traditional boat design and reimagined it through the lens of military stealth technology. There were no visible windows on the lower levels, just dark panels that could have been glass or metal. "Why does it need to be radar invisible?" Sarah asked, voicing the question that was nagging at me. Webb's smile tightened. "The destination is near sensitive military zones. The owner prefers to travel without official attention." He paused, studying our faces. "I trust that won't be a problem. Your contract does specify discretion as a primary requirement." We both nodded quickly. For $75,000, we could be discreet about a lot of things. Webb led us up a gangway that felt more like a bridge between dimensions. The deck was made of the same dark material as the hull, and our footsteps were strangely muffled. Instead of the usual collection of deck furniture and entertainment areas, the yacht's topside was almost minimalist. There were a few bench-style seating areas built into the structure itself, but mostly just clean lines and that strange light-absorbing surface. "Jesus," Sarah whispered beside me. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Webb said with the first genuine smile we'd seen from him. "The hull is made from a proprietary alloy, completely non-reflective, designed for minimal radar signature. The owner values privacy above all else." As we got closer, I could see that the yacht's superstructure was more angular than curved, like someone had taken traditional boat design and reimagined it through the lens of military stealth technology. There were no visible windows on the lower levels, just dark panels that could have been glass or metal. "Why does it need to be radar invisible?" Sarah asked, voicing the question that was nagging at me. Webb's smile tightened. "The destination is near sensitive military zones. The owner prefers to travel without official attention." He paused, studying our faces. "I trust that won't be a problem?
Your contract does specify discretion as a primary requirement. We both nodded quickly. For $75,000, we could be discreet about a lot of things. Webb led us up a gangway that felt more like a bridge between dimensions. The deck was made of the same dark material, and our footsteps were strangely muffled. Instead of the usual collection of deck furniture and entertainment areas, the yacht's topside was almost minimalist. There were a few bench-style seating areas built into the structure itself, but mostly just clean lines and that strange, light-absorbing surface. The bridge is fully automated, Webb explained, leading us toward what I assumed was the wheelhouse. GPS navigation, autopilot, collision avoidance, the works. You'll primarily be monitoring systems and handling any manual corrections the computer can't manage. Inside, the yacht was even more impressive and unsettling.
The bridge looked like something from a science fiction movie. Banks of monitors, touch screens, and control panels that pulsed with soft blue light. Everything was perfectly clean and organized, but there was something sterile about it that made my skin crawl. "Where's the traditional wheel?" I asked, looking around for the familiar sight of a ship's steering system. "Integrated into the main console," Webb said, tapping a panel that lit up at his touch. "The entire vessel is controlled through these interfaces. Don't worry, there's a comprehensive manual in your cabin, and the system is designed to be intuitive." He walked us through the basic controls, his fingers dancing over touchscreens with practiced ease. The navigation system was impressive, showing our current position in Palau and the planned route toward our destination, a tiny dot in the Pacific that the screen labeled simply as Research Station Alpha. "Research station?" Sarah asked. "Marine biology," Webb said quickly. "The owner funds oceanic research, very cutting-edge stuff." As we explored the rest of the yacht, I began to notice details that didn't quite fit. The living quarters were luxurious enough. A master cabin with a king-sized bed, a smaller guest cabin, a galley equipped with high-end appliances, but there were things that seemed odd for a pleasure craft. Reinforced doors with electronic locks. Panels in the floor marked with warning symbols I didn't recognize. And everywhere, that strange absence of traditional nautical design. The galley had a window that should have offered a view of the marina, but instead of glass, there was the same dark material as the hull. When I asked Webb about it, he explained that all the yacht's windows were actually high-definition displays showing camera feeds from outside. For security, he said, and to maintain the hull's integrity. In the master cabin, Sarah found the manual Webb had mentioned. It was thick as a phone book and filled with diagrams that looked more like spacecraft schematics than boat operations. The chapter titles included things like biocontainment protocols and emergency electrical discharge systems. "This doesn't look like a standard yacht manual," she said, flipping through pages of technical specifications. Webb glanced at the open book and closed it gently. "The owner's modifications are extensive. Most of it is automated. You won't need to worry about the technical details." He handed us each a tablet loaded with navigation software and emergency procedures. Your route is programmed. The journey should take approximately 10 days, depending on weather conditions. The yacht has provisions for 3 weeks and can handle any storm you're likely to encounter. As Webb prepared to leave, he made one final stop in the galley.
Opening what looked like a standard cabinet, he revealed a collection of sealed hatches built into the floor, each marked with warning labels: biological hazard, high voltage, authorized personnel only. Under no circumstances should these be opened, Webb said, his tone serious for the first time since we'd met him. They contain the owner's experimental equipment. The insurance doesn't cover curiosity. Sarah and I exchanged glances. The warnings were ominous, but Webb's explanation made sense. Rich people had expensive toys, and some of those toys came with safety risks. "What kind of experiments?" I asked. "Marine research," Webb repeated. "Ocean chemistry, deep water pressure studies. The owner is particularly interested in abyssal ecosystems." He left us with final instructions. Maintain radio silence except for emergencies. Follow the programmed route exactly, and under no circumstances deviate toward any military vessels or research stations we might encounter. The Pacific was a big place, but it was also heavily monitored. As Webb's boat disappeared into the distance, Sarah and I stood on the deck of our temporary command, watching the sunset over Palau. The yacht hummed almost imperceptibly beneath our feet. Not the familiar rumble of diesel engines, but something quieter and more sophisticated. "I can't believe this is real," Sarah said, leaning against the railing. 2 weeks from now, we'll have enough money to buy our own boat." I wrapped my arms around her, breathing in the salt air and the promise of a different future. The yacht was strange, sure, but strange was just another word for expensive when you were talking about billionaire toys. We'd been sailing together for 5 years, and this was exactly the kind of opportunity we'd been working toward. The first night at anchor in Palau's harbor was peaceful. The yacht's systems monitored themselves, soft chimes occasionally alerting us to routine status updates. The automated navigation had plotted our course, a route that would take us far from commercial shipping lanes out into the deepest parts of the Pacific. We spent the evening exploring our temporary home more thoroughly. The automation was incredible. The yacht could practically sail itself, leaving us to supervise rather than actively pilot. The communications array was more sophisticated than anything I'd seen on civilian vessels, and the radar system painted a picture of the surrounding ocean with military precision. It was only when we went to bed that I noticed something odd about the master cabin's design. The bed was bolted to the floor, not unusual for a yacht, but it was also surrounded by what looked like blast-resistant panels built into the walls. When I mentioned it to Sarah, she pointed out that the porthole above our bed wasn't a display screen like the others. It was actual reinforced glass, thick enough to withstand serious pressure. "Pressure from what?" she asked, sleepily. I didn't have an answer, but as I drifted off to sleep, I found myself thinking about those warning labels on the sealed hatches and wondering what kind of marine research required biological hazard protocols.
The next morning, we started our engines and began the journey that would change our lives forever. As Palau disappeared behind us and we headed into the vast emptiness of the Pacific, I felt the familiar thrill of open ocean sailing. The yacht cut through the waves with an efficiency that was almost supernatural, its dark hull slicing through blue water like a blade. We were 3 days out from Palau when the first strange thing happened. I was checking the sonar display, a habit from my commercial fishing days, when I noticed an anomaly on the depth finder. We were sailing over some of the deepest water on Earth. The ocean floor was more than 6 miles beneath us. But the sonar was showing something else, something massive, moving in the deep water far below. "Sarah, come look at this." She joined me at the navigation station, squinting at the display. The sonar painted a picture of the ocean in green and yellow lines, showing the vast emptiness beneath our hull. But there, at the very edge of the sonar's range, was something that didn't belong. A mass, easily the size of a city block, moving slowly through the deep water. "What is that?" Sarah whispered. I adjusted the sonar settings, trying to get a clearer picture. For a moment, the image sharpened, and we could see what looked like a biological shape, something with the irregular contours of a living creature. But then the signal faded, and the sonar showed only empty water. "Must be a malfunction," I said, but I didn't believe it. The yacht's electronics were too sophisticated for simple glitches. "Or a whale," Sarah suggested hopefully. "A really big whale." But we both knew that no whale was that large, and no whale lived at those depths. Over the next few days, the sonar contacts became more frequent, always at the edge of detection, always massive, always moving. The shapes were clearly biological, organic curves and flowing movements that no submarine could replicate. And they seemed to be following us. By the 6th day, Sarah and I were taking turns watching the sonar, fascinated and increasingly unnerved by our mysterious escort. The contacts were getting closer, rising from the deepest trenches toward the middle depths, and they were getting bigger. It was on the 7th night that we heard the first sounds. I was on watch, sipping coffee and monitoring our course, when a deep thrumming vibration ran through the yacht. It was felt more than heard, a resonance that seemed to come from the water itself. The sound was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, and it made the steel hull vibrate in harmony. Sarah appeared from the cabin, her face pale. "Did you hear that?" "Feel it, more like," I said, checking the instruments for any sign of mechanical problems.
Everything showed green. The thrumming came again, deeper this time, and lasting longer. It was answered by another sound from a different direction. The same deep resonance, but with a different rhythm. And then another and another, until we were surrounded by a symphony of deep ocean voices calling to each other through the water. "Oh God," Sarah whispered, gripping my arm. "There's more than one." The sonar screen lit up like a Christmas tree. Contacts all around us, massive shapes moving through the deep water, their positions corresponding exactly to the sounds we were hearing. They were huge, each one easily the size of a large building, and they were rising. We stood frozen on the bridge, watching the sonar display as the creatures ascended through the water column. 3 miles deep, 2 miles, 1 mile. They were moving slowly but steadily upward, drawn by us. Drawn by us. "We need to change course," Sarah said, her voice tight with fear. I was already reaching for the navigation controls when the first impact hit the hull. It wasn't violent, more like a gentle nudge from something incredibly large. The yacht rocked slightly, and we heard the unmistakable sound of something massive brushing against the hull below the waterline. The sonar showed one of the creatures directly beneath us, its bulk filling the screen. It was so large that our yacht was just a tiny speck on its back, and it was moving upward, pushing against our hull with what felt almost like curiosity. "It's trying to surface," I said, my mouth dry with terror. The yacht tilted as the creature adjusted its position, and through the thick glass of our cabin porthole, we caught our first glimpse of what was down there. A surface that wasn't quite skin and wasn't quite scale, colored in shades of deep purple and black that seemed to shift in the dim light from our running lights. And eyes. Clusters of eyes the size of windows, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The creature stayed with us for almost an hour, occasionally bumping the hull with what might have been tentacles or fins. The sonar showed others circling at a distance, their massive forms moving through the water with the grace of dancers. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they sank back into the depths, leaving us alone on the surface, with only the memory of those impossible eyes. Sarah and I didn't sleep that night. We sat on the bridge, staring at the sonar display and jumping at every sound the yacht made. By morning, the contacts had faded back to the deepest parts of the ocean, but we knew they were still there, watching, following. It was Sarah who finally voiced what we were both thinking. "This isn't normal. Yachts don't get escorted by sea monsters. There's something about this boat that's attracting them." I nodded, thinking about the strange hull material, the reinforced construction, the warning labels on the sealed compartments.
Webb said the owner was interested in abyssal ecosystems. What if he's not just interested in studying them? Sarah asked. What if he's trying to attract them? The thought sent ice through my veins. We were in the middle of the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean, sailing a yacht that seemed designed for something other than luxury travel. And below us, creatures the size of city blocks were following our every move. "We need to know what's in those compartments," I said. Sarah looked at me like I'd suggested we jump overboard. Webb said not to open them. Webb also forgot to mention that our luxury cruise would encounter things that shouldn't exist. I gestured at the sonar display, still showing faint contacts in the deepest water. Whatever's down there is interested in this boat. It took us another day to work up the courage to investigate. The creatures hadn't surfaced again, but the sonar contacts were constant now. A small fleet of impossible beings following our course through the deep ocean. The yacht sailed on autopilot while we tried to make sense of what was happening.
Finally, on the 9th night, while the sonar painted pictures of giants in the deep water below, we made our decision. Sarah kept watch while I examined the sealed compartments in the galley floor. The hatches were secured with electronic locks that required key cards we didn't have. But the yacht's toolkit included everything we needed to force our way in. The first compartment I opened should have contained emergency supplies or mechanical equipment. Instead, I found myself staring down into a space filled with electronic monitoring equipment. Banks of computers hummed quietly in the dim light, their screens displaying data streams I didn't recognize. But one screen I understood perfectly. It was showing our vital signs: heart rate, blood pressure, stress indicators, all being recorded and transmitted in real time. "Sarah," I called, my voice barely a whisper. "You need to see this." She joined me at the open hatch, her face going pale as she took in the surveillance equipment. "They're monitoring us. They've been watching us this whole time." I opened another compartment, and then another. Each one revealed more pieces of a puzzle that was starting to form a picture we didn't want to see. Environmental sensors measuring our body chemistry through the air filtration system. Cameras hidden throughout the yacht recording our every movement. And in the largest compartment, a communication array that was broadcasting our position and biological data to someone on the other end. But it was the final compartment that revealed the truth. Instead of equipment, this hatch opened onto a small chamber containing a single computer terminal and a stack of printed documents. The top sheet was labeled Operation Leviathan, Protocol Documentation, and beneath it was a mission brief that made my blood run cold.
The yacht wasn't a luxury vessel. It was a research platform designed to study megafauna abyssal specimens by using human subjects as biological lures. The strange hull coving wasn't for stealth. It was designed to conduct bioelectric fields that would attract deep ocean predators. The sealed compartments contained equipment for monitoring and recording encounters with what the documents referred to as previously undocumented apex predators of extreme size. We weren't the crew. We were bait. Sarah read over my shoulder, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "This is why they hired a couple. Humans traveling together produce stronger bioelectric signatures. Our stress hormones, our pheromones, it's all designed to bring those things to the surface." I flipped through more pages, finding detailed scientific protocols for encounter documentation and specimen behavioral analysis. There were photos of creatures that matched what we'd seen on the sonar, massive, tentacled beings with those clusters of alien eyes. And there were notes about previous research subjects who had helped gather this data. Previous subjects who were never mentioned as having survived their voyages. "We have to get out of here," Sarah said, backing away from the hatch. "We have to turn around right now." I was already heading for the bridge when the thrumming started again. This time, it was different, more urgent, more excited. The sound seemed to be coming from multiple directions, and it was getting louder. The sonar screen showed why.
The creatures were rising again, but this time they weren't moving slowly. Dozens of massive contacts were ascending rapidly through the water column, drawn by something that was making them more active than we'd ever seen. "What's different?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with panic. "Why are they more excited now?" I looked at the biological monitoring displays we'd discovered, watching our stress indicators spike off the charts. Because we know the truth now. Our fear is stronger. We're giving off more of whatever they're attracted to. The first creature breached the surface 100 yards from our starboard side. It rose from the water like a living island, shedding thousands of gallons of seawater as it revealed itself to the night air. In the glow of our running lights, we could see skin that seemed to move independently of the body beneath it, and those terrible eyes, dozens of them, all focused on our yacht. More creatures surfaced around us, creating a ring of living nightmares that turned the Pacific into an alien landscape. They were even larger than we'd imagined, some easily 200 feet long, their bodies defying every law of biology I thought I knew. They moved with the fluid grace of sea creatures, but their intelligence was obvious in the way they coordinated their movements, the way they seemed to communicate through those deep, thrumming calls. And they were all looking at us. The yacht rocked as one of the creatures moved closer, its bulk displacing enough water to create waves that lifted us like a toy. Through the bridge windows, I could see appendages that might have been tentacles or arms reaching toward our hull, exploring the surface with what looked almost like gentleness. "They're not trying to hurt us," Sarah whispered, watching one of the beings trace the length of our yacht with something that resembled a finger the size of a telephone pole. "They're just curious." But even as she spoke, we could feel the yacht being lifted. The creatures were working together, using their combined strength to raise our vessel above the water's surface. We were being carried by living beings whose very existence rewrote everything I thought I knew about the ocean. That's when the lights appeared on the horizon. At first, I thought it was another ship, maybe even rescue. But as the lights grew brighter and more numerous, I realized we were looking at a small fleet of vessels approaching our position. Military boats by the look of their formations and the way they cut through the water with purposeful efficiency. "The research team," Sarah said, her voice hollow with understanding. "They've been tracking us this whole time, waiting for us to bring the creatures to the surface." The approaching vessels were equipped with lights powerful enough to turn night into day. As they drew closer, the water around us lit up like a stadium, revealing the full scope of what we were dealing with. The creatures holding our yacht were just the beginning. The ocean around us was filled with beings that shouldn't have existed, their alien forms creating a sight that no human was meant to witness. The lead vessel pulled alongside us, and figures in protective suits began boarding our yacht. They moved with the efficiency of people who had done this before, setting up equipment and taking readings as if giant sea creatures were just another day at the office. A woman in a white lab coat climbed onto our bridge, removing her helmet to reveal a face that was both beautiful and completely cold. She didn't ask if we were okay. She didn't introduce herself. She went straight to the monitoring equipment we'd discovered and began downloading data. "Excellent response patterns," she said, scrolling through our biological readings. "The stress indicators show significant elevation, and the pheromone outputs are well within optimal ranges." "Who are you?" I demanded, though part of me already knew the answer. "Dr. Victoria Hayes, Neptune Marine Solutions. You've done excellent work as research subjects." She smiled with the warmth of a shark. "The specimens have shown remarkable behavioral adaptations to your presence. The pain response from the sonic deterrent was particularly instructive." "Pain response?" asked. Dr.
Hayes gestured toward the creatures still surrounding us, and for the first time I noticed that several of them bore fresh wounds, burn marks and cuts that looked deliberately inflicted. We've been testing their reactions to various stimuli. Your presence allowed us to observe their protective instincts toward perceived prey. Very enlightening. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The yacht's defensive systems weren't designed to protect us from the creatures. They were weapons disguised as safety measures, designed to let untrained civilians inflict damage on beings that had come to investigate us out of curiosity. "You used us to hurt them," I said, the full horror of our situation finally becoming clear. "You used yourselves," Dr. Hayes corrected. "When you activated the emergency protocols, you were following your survival instincts. We simply provided the tools and the circumstances." She turned back to her data, making notes on a tablet, while the creatures around us continued to bear wounds from systems we'd activated in our panic. "The specimens show remarkable resilience and what appears to be complex social structures. The larger individuals seem to protect the smaller ones, and they demonstrate clear communication patterns." "You're studying them to kill them?" Sarah said. "We're studying them to understand them," Dr. Hayes replied. "The applications for military bioweaponry alone are worth billions. But capture and containment require detailed behavioral data." Through the bridge windows, I could see more boats arriving. These weren't research vessels. They were equipped with nets and harpoons, devices designed to capture living creatures the size of buildings. The beings that had followed us with what seemed like curiosity were about to become specimens in the laboratory of human ambition. "The creatures trust you," Dr. Hayes explained, consulting her readings. "Your bioelectric signatures have become familiar to them over the past 10 days.
They associate you with safety. That will make the capture process significantly easier. We won't help you, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. We were in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, surrounded by military vessels and creatures from the deepest places on Earth. Our options for resistance were limited. Dr. Hayes smiled again, that cold expression that never reached her eyes. You've already helped us more than you know. But don't worry, your contract includes a very comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. You'll be compensated well for your silence. And if we refuse to be silent, I asked, then you'll discover that the Pacific is a very deep ocean, and accidents happen even to experienced sailors. The capture operation began at dawn. The creatures, still trusting in our presence, allowed the research vessels to approach closer than they ever would have otherwise.
The humans they had followed for 10 days across the Pacific had become a bridge between their world and ours, and that bridge was about to be used against them. I watched from the deck of our yacht as nets designed for whales were deployed around beings the size of apartment buildings. The creatures' confusion was obvious. They had never encountered this kind of aggression from the surface world, and their protective instincts toward us made them hesitate to defend themselves. When the first harpoons found their marks, the ocean erupted in sounds that I'll hear for the rest of my life. The thrumming calls became screams of pain and rage that carried for miles across the water. The creatures tried to escape, diving toward the depths that had always been their sanctuary. But the nets held, and more boats arrived with equipment designed to drag gods from their temples. Sarah and I stood on the deck of the yacht that had been our prison and our bait, watching the systematic capture of beings that had existed in the deep ocean for millions of years before humans ever dreamed of sailing. We had been the Judas goats, leading them to slaughter through our mere presence. By sunset, 3 of the smaller creatures had been loaded onto specialized transport vessels, their massive forms restrained by technology designed for a war against the impossible. The others had managed to escape back to the depths, but their wounded cries followed them down, carrying the news of betrayal into the deepest trenches of the Pacific. Dr. Hayes approached us as the operation concluded, her tablet full of data that would fund the next phase of human expansion into realms that should have remained unexplored. Your payment will be transferred within 48 hours, she said. The non-disclosure agreements you signed are binding for life, with penalties that extend to family members and associates. I trust we understand each other. We understood perfectly. We had been recruited to commit a crime against nature, and now we were accessories to something that would haunt us forever. The helicopter that lifted us from the yacht's deck carried us away from the scene of our betrayal.
but it couldn't carry us away from the knowledge of what we'd done. Below us, the Pacific stretched to every horizon, looking peaceful and empty. But Sarah and I knew better now. We knew what lived in the deep places, and we knew what humans were willing to do to possess it. As Palau grew larger in the helicopter's windscreen, Dr. Hayes made one final comment that ensured our silence would be absolute. "The next phase of research will require more subjects," she said, not looking up from her tablet. "We'll be in touch if we need your services again." The money appeared in our account exactly as promised. $75,000, enough to buy our own boat and start the life we'd always dreamed of. But the price of that dream was the knowledge that somewhere in the deepest parts of the ocean, ancient beings were learning to fear the surface for the first time in their long existence. And they had learned that fear from us. We bought a small sailboat with part of the money and tried to return to the life we'd known before. But every time we sailed beyond the sight of land, every time we looked at sonar displays or heard the sound of water against the hull, we remembered the thrumming calls from the deep and the trust we'd betrayed. The ocean that had once been our sanctuary had become a reminder of complicity, and every sunset on the water carried the echo of voices calling from trenches so deep that sunlight had never touched them. We had sailed into the abyss as dreamers and returned as witnesses to humanity's capacity for exploitation of even the most wondrous mysteries. The worst part was knowing that somewhere in Neptune Marine Solutions laboratories, those captured beings were being studied, dissected, and analyzed. Their ancient wisdom was being reduced to data points and military applications, their songs of the deep becoming blueprints for weapons. And we had been the ones to bring them to the surface, drawn by our need and manipulated by our trust. The Pacific Ocean covers more than 64 million square miles and contains more than half of the world's water. It's so vast that most of it has never been explored, so deep that its trenches could swallow mountains without a trace. For most of human history, we've sailed across its surface like insects on the skin of a sleeping giant, never knowing what watches us from below. Now I know. And I know that some knowledge comes with a price that can never be paid, only carried, like a weight that grows heavier with every passing day. Sarah and I carry that weight together. Two people who learned that our dreams could be purchased with the suffering of beings we never should have met. The money is gone now, spent on therapy and sleepless nights, and the constant need to stay near shores where the water isn't deep enough to hide the things we brought to light. We don't sail anymore. We can't. The ocean remembers us, and we remember what lives beneath its surface, waiting in trenches older than continents for the next time humans decide that wonder is just another resource to be harvested. Sometimes, on clear nights when the moon is dark, we still hear them calling from the deep places. The sound carries across thousands of miles of water, through layers of ocean that press down with the weight of worlds. They're singing the songs they sang before we betrayed them. But now, those songs carry a note of loss that cuts through water and flesh and bone to reach the place where guilt lives in the human heart. We were hired to sail a billionaire's yacht, and we thought we were living the dream. We were the bait, and the dream was a nightmare that someone else was having.
And in the deepest places of the Pacific Ocean, that nightmare continues, funded by the data we helped collect and the trust we helped destroy. The abyss looks back at us now, and it knows our names, and it remembers what we did when the lights came on and the nets fell and the ancient peace of the deep water was broken forever. Some jobs change your life, others change your soul, and some, the ones that come with non-disclosure agreements and warnings about curiosity, change the entire world in ways that can never be undone. We were just trying to make a living. We ended up helping to end a way of life that had existed since before humans learned to fear the dark.